it's appropriate that the last tapestry is the Baha'i, because we have all the tapestries to the world religions, and then here they are again, repeated. So I think it's very appropriate that this is the last one. So let's hear it again for our tapestry team and committee. So I thought I would just share a little bit about the Baha'i religion and a little bit of a few stories that have struck me from doing my research. So the Baha'i faith was founded in 1863 by Baha'u'lláh, and his son Abdu'l-Baha became the leader in the late 1800s. The heart of the teachings seek a unified world that ensures prosperity for all nations, for all races, for all creeds, and all classes. And what I appreciate about it is I see a lot of similarities in the Baha'i faith to unity, right? That they see this awakening of humanity taking place, and it's the same vision, if you will, that Charles Fillmore had as the awakening of humankind, that we become enlightened, that we become awake, that we become kind and compassionate and loving, that we express this Christ principle. The three core principles of this faith is the unity of God, the unity of all religions, and the unity of humanity. The Baha'i faith believes that all religions have a purpose, and that the nature of God is revealed through each one, and that the founders of the world's religions bring, if you will, a progression of consciousness. So from Buddha, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, that there's this expansion in consciousness and something that we learn from each one and that is needed from each one. The first public mention of the Baha'i faith in the West was in 1893 at the Columbia Exposition, or the World's Fair, in Chicago. And there was a parliament of world religions that happened there, and a prayer that was written by the founder was used in the closing ceremony. And I want to share with you what they said in that closing. That all nations should become one faith, and all men are brothers. And there is patriarchal language here, so just warning you. That all men and all men are brothers, that the bond of affection and unity between the sons of men and daughters of women should be strengthened, that diversity of religions should cease, and differences of race be annulled. What harm is there in this? Yet so shall it be. These fruitless strifes, these ruinous wars shall pass away, and the most great peace shall come. Do not you in Europe need this also? Let not a man glory in this, that he loves his country. Let him rather glory in this, that he loves his kind. These are very progressive words for 1893, are they not? I mean, this is a very enlightened experience. So Abdu'l-Baha made his pilgrimage to the United States in 1912. He traveled in North America for 239 days. And the whole time he was here, he repeated his theme of racial equality, stating that the differences in races should be celebrated. He compared the races to a garden. He said, when you go to a garden, you like to see all the different colors of the flowers, right? I mean, there's this great beauty in that. And he said, if all the flowers in the garden were of the same color, the effect would be monotonous and wearying to the eye. And so we need all races. He also, if he's speaking this 50 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, when Jim Crow laws were, big, and he performed interracial marriages back in 1912. Now you have to understand, this is 50 years after the proclamation of emancipation. And not only that, but he went to Washington, D.C. To speak, part of his pilgrimage, and he was speaking at a Persian diplomat's home who was also a Baha'i. And as he was looking around the room, he noticed that everybody was seated according to their status, according to their class. And he noticed that there were a lot of white faces in the room. And so he stood up and he said, "Where is Mr. Gregory? Bring Mr. Gregory." So Mr. Gregory had been traveling with him. He was an American attorney, an African-American man, and he had been traveling with him. And so he stopped the entire event until they rearranged the tables, they rearranged the plates, and they invited Mr. Gregory to sit with them. And one of the articles I read said that in one single stroke, he defied Washington protocol and swept aside the practice of segregation by race and categorization by social rank, setting a powerful example and challenging the customs of a deeply divided capital city. So granted, things did not change, of course, after that, but he took a stand in this, and it's part of the Baha'i faith. So I found the Baha'i faith back in the 70s when I lived in Chicago. I didn't even know it was there. I mean, I'd never seen it before, and it became a place actually where a lot of people would park and, you know, make out and go, "Oh, look at that, there's a temple there." The whole time I'm sitting there going, "Where did this come from? I've never seen this before." So I started to seek it out, and they had a service on Sunday at 3 in the afternoons, and at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I used to go pretty much every Sunday. And it was the service was very much like the Quakers, where you would sit in silence, and there was no minister or main speaker. If you had something to say, you sat in the front row, and then there was a microphone, and one at a time you would stand up. People would stand up. They would do spiritual readings, scripture readings, whatever, and that would go on for a while. And the thing about the Baha'i temple that you can't not notice when you walk in is it's open every day. It's open to the public. And the prayer energy in that room is so powerful that as soon as you walk in the door, you get hit with it. And for anybody who has trouble being quiet or meditating, I recommend that you go there, because the energy is so powerful that you have to sit down and your mind is immediately clear, and you go to that deep, spiritual, centered place. So it's a very, very holy ground. It's a true sanctuary. But a couple of my favorite stories are about the building of the Baha'i temple. As Evelyn shared with you, it took 70 years to build this. Can you imagine? I mean, we're talking like, oh, we've got 2 or 3 years with our building. It sounds like forever. But can you imagine 70 years? It's like, who'd be around to see it, right? A whole generation is how long it would take. And there was one woman by the name of Nettie Tobin. And she was a Baha'i, and she was very poor. She was a seamstress, a widow. She had 2 children, and she wanted to contribute to the temple, but she didn't have any money. So she had this vision. You know, there was all this talk about you had to have the right stone, the right cornerstone for the building. So there was a construction project going on near her house, and she went up to the foreman and she said, "Can I have, you know, some of the stones and the rocks that you are throwing away that have been damaged?" They were limestone. And he said, "Sure, you can take this." And it's this big, giant rock. And he says, "You can have this." Now, for those of you who don't know, she lives in Chicago. The Baha'i temple's in Wilmette. It's a bit out there. It's not just down the street. So she got a carpet, she rolled it up in a carpet, she got some twine, and she got some friends of hers, and they're dragging it across the city. Then there were horse carts. They got it on a horse cart, which they had to talk their way into that. Then they had to keep going. And the story that I heard when I was back at the temple was that they actually got it on the L train. I don't know how they would do that. They get it off of there, and again, they drag it, and she gets it to a farmer's field where they just sort of collapse because they're exhausted. This takes days, of course. And they get a hand cart, they put it in, the handle breaks, they get it fixed. There's a whole group of people dragging it to the site. They get it to the site, and the whole cart just collapsed. So they're like, okay, let's just leave it here. This is where it is. And when the leader came to dedicate the ground, so this is a great story because there were supposed to be all these amazing stones that came from Persia or wherever, but they never arrived. And the only one left was this stone that had been gotten from this construction site. And he said, this will be our cornerstone. So he goes to break the ground, which of course for some reason was incredibly hard. He's got an axe, he breaks the axe, they get a shovel, they break the shovel. It's just like a comedy of errors. And another follower of his, another woman, Corinne True, went up to him and she said, I think that women should be the ones who help break the ground. So once he had the ground broken and the stone in, then one woman and then Corinne True also came up. So he's demonstrating again, this is 1912, this equality of both of the races and of women. When they put the stone in the ground, he says, the temple is already built. The temple is already built. To Corinne, the master's declaration meant that there was no question about whether the temple would ever be built. It was simply a matter of the believers focusing faithfully on that vision that he had shared with them that chilly, gray, and windy day in Wilmette. Again, it took 70 years for it to be built. But you can almost, even in the words, the people who were there said as soon as he spoke those words, when he put the stone into the ground, that you could feel that it was done. You could feel that it was done. And so here we are on our pilgrimage with our 3 years or our 2 years or whatever it's going to be. That's nothing, right? It's nothing. It's so think about that when you start to think, oh my gosh, how much longer are we going to be in this building project? It's not 70 years, right? It's 2, it's 3. The founders also had a vision of the United States, and they said that because the people here seem to grasp and manifest on the material realm pretty easily, that the next step is to manifest that same in the spiritual realm, that there is a divine destiny for the United States. Again, he saw, like the birds, one wing is male, one wing is female. He sees this all of humanity rising. And I think that we can see this destiny of the United States manifesting. I mean, look how many people meditate. Look how many people pray. Look how many people have a spiritual practice, a love of nature, a love of yoga. It's sort of just kind of taking root and taking over. So I hold to that idea that we are on this spiritual pursuit. So again, as we bless this final tapestry, we know that we call in all the religions of the world. And I want to share with you as we close a prayer that was written by Abdu'l-Baha about the United States. And so we're going to close with a prayer. So this is what he said about the United States, that man is capable of material advancement, but the other power is spiritual, and through its development, his inner potential and nature is awakened. And these powers are like 2 wings that must be developed. So let us pray. O thou kind Lord, this gathering is turning to thee. These hearts are radiant with thy love. These minds and spirits are exhilarated by the message of thy glad tidings. Dear God, let this American democracy become glorious in spiritual degrees and render this just government victorious. Confirm this revered nation to upraise the standard of the oneness of humanity, to move toward the most great peace, to become thereby most glorious and praiseworthy among the nations of the world. Dear God, may this nation be worthy of thy favors and deserving of thy mercy. Make it precious and near to thee through thy bounty and bestowal. Abdu'l-Baha. And we do affirm this in the name and through the power of the living Christ.